Hello. In the Crown of Aragon, 639 years ago, it was January 14th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico. And this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcora Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. The archive of the Crown of Aragon is available online because of a massive digitization project from the Spanish government, and we are able to see hundreds upon hundreds of pages of what was written down during their reign. It really is an amazing resource. Let's begin today's document. My journey with today's document can be summed up in one question: pigs or patios? Now, before we get into how we got to that kind of question, I'm going to just go over some of the sourcing information for the document. This is from Joan's Register. It is dated, of course, January 14th. It's written in Granollers, where we know Joan has been for several days and will be until after that January 16th big meeting. The group that it's addressed to is the Prohomens, the officials in charge. You could think of it as like the city council, the people who really are deciding matters for the city. And in this case, it's the Prohomens of the city of Girona, where Joan has been living for a very long time. So we've got the writer, the addressee, we know the location and the date. We know that it's a busy, sensitive time for Joan. And this document, which is in Catalan, so it's more accessible to me, this document just feels so low in importance that I just am really trying to wrap my head around what is going on with the workflow that Joan is taking on at this time. So this particular document is, it seems, authorizing some kind of sale, possibly about real estate, likely about real estate, which is a journey that I got to. There's a person in the first line, a Berenguer Compagnie, and then in the third line is somebody else, Joan's treasurer, Roman de Soler. So Roman de Soler is arranging some kind of sale. Maybe this Berenguer Compagnie is purchasing some property. It's actually really hard for me to figure out who's doing what. And that's because later on in the letter, the person who appears in the first line, Berenguer, appears again. And it seems like in that instance, Berenguer is the seller, not the purchaser. So it's not like this is a source of income for Joan. I think the person getting the income from the sale is this Berenguer. And so I can't quite figure out what is happening here in terms of the bigger picture? It just looks to me like Joan is authorizing this sale. Why does he need to authorize this sale? It would make sense if it was some gigantic purchase, but it doesn't seem to be that way, because in the second line, there's the verb vendre, which means to sell, and then following that is the word certes, which means certain, and then there's three words, patis, porches, and then the third word I'm trying to figure out because it seems like it should be kind of easy, but it's not, because of minims. Minims is the paleographic term, a minim, for when there's like the top of the letter M, like some kind of curvy top, or even like an I, like some kind of, it's sticking up, and so the letter M has two minims at the top, like 2 points that stick up. And so here there's a possibility that I'm looking at ENU. It's also possible I'm looking at EMI. And then there's an outside chance that the first letter is C. I don't think it is, but it could be. And then it could be something like CUN. So the number of minims can clue you into what letters are being written. There's also a macron above that word. And so there's a letter that's been excluded in services of abbreviation. You might be wondering, why on earth is there so much abbreviation when it seems like there's no real purpose to just leaving out one letter here and there? Why is that something that scribes would do when it doesn't even seem to make that much difference in the amount of writing or space? Two answers. First, it was customary. To abbreviate was just the way things were done. Everybody abbreviated, you just keep on abbreviating. Second, every little bit helps, because even though there was an abundance of paper, there wasn't like an unlimited supply of paper. And also, more importantly, there wasn't an unlimited supply of time. The more you abbreviate, the faster you can get a letter done. So the more abbreviations that you internalize, the less time it takes to write the thing down, and that all will accrue, when we're talking about hundreds of letters, into some serious time savings. So all of this custom of abbreviation adds up to a big problem for me when I'm trying to figure out what is that word, the third word in this set of three, unless patis is somehow modifying porches. And this is where I got thrown off, because the word porches could actually be pronounced porques, as in pork, and I've seen that word in its exact spelling as it appears here, porches, used to describe wild boars, the kinds of wild boars that Joan would go out and have fun hunting out in the forest. So when I first encountered that word, I was thinking, we're talking about pigs. And then I put the transcription that I did of this letter into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT was like, no, there's no way that this is pigs. We're definitely talking about a real estate sale here. And I looked back at the overall context of the letter, and yeah, it does seem to be about a real estate sale. But at the same time, I've got these lingering doubts, because it just seems so, well, I guess it's weird to kind of purchase certain wild boars, and that would also be weird. But I just can't quite settle on what is the meaning of the phrase patis, porques, en venas. I don't know. And I can't quite figure out what unit is being sold here. I have a very helpful medieval Catalan glossary that I looked these words up in, or tried to find them, couldn't couldn't really get anywhere. I have a feeling like a month from now, or maybe like 4 months from now, I'm going to look back at this and say, oh, it's so obvious, but I'm just in it right now. And so I'm kind of, you know, as the cliche goes, I can't really see the forest for the trees. So I'm not quite sure what is being sold. But Joan is authorizing its sale, and he's informing the city officials of Girona that he has authorized this sale. Which brings me back to the question that I was talking about earlier about Joan's workflow. Why is he spending time on this? It just doesn't seem all that urgent. Yesterday, we had a document in which Violante is saying that there is urgent business, there's difficulties being encountered. And then we encounter this kind of humdrum matter of business being undertaken by Joan. Again, like this has already been an issue that I've been struggling with in earlier documents from a couple days ago. Now, what I will say is that I have seen documents where the king is making a ruling on something that seems very, very small. And that's something I have noticed in documents from Joan, as well as other royal family members at different times and different years. For example, I did a whole study on Joan's ruling about a certain hot springs called Caldes de Strac, and he made this ruling in 1394, and he's basically also ordering that the hot springs infrastructure gets cleaned up, and because it's kind of run down. And so it just seems like, gosh, it seems like the monarchs were just involved in these very granular issues, and that it's just like a constant flow of these small things in all these different localities within the realm. And maybe Joan is just like, I gotta take care of at least a few of these each day, or else it's gonna hopelessly pile up. Maybe that's what's going on here. Also, it could be that if I knew more about the people in this document and the property being discussed, it would be clear to me that it is important, that it's a big deal. One last thing that I noticed about this document. At the very end of the text block, after the year, there's what looks like the Latin abbreviation for vidette, and then SPEREND, followed by some large cursive letters that are kind of hard to figure out exactly what they're signifying. Sperend. And that kind of reminds me of how Joan had asked Esperando Cardona to get to Granollers as fast as possible. So maybe Esperando Cardona is making some kind of additional approval of some of this. Esperando Cardona is not necessarily indicated by this, but it would be just an interesting coincidence if that was not Esperando Cardona getting involved in this business somehow. The same thing appears at the end of the next document on this folio. So at the bottom of the page, you'll see the same thing again, and that one is from the 10th of January. So maybe it's not going to work out because the letter asking for Esperanto Cardona was on the 12th. So unless there's something weird with the date going on here, then maybe it's just a coincidence. Or maybe Esperanto Cardona is involved in these documents after the fact, and the date of the 10th of January for the second letter on this folio is not exactly reflecting the time of composition, because we've got sperend at the end of that one too. I am stumped on that. I'm going to have to figure out this videt sperend and why it's starting to appear at the end of these letters. And I'll probably figure out it's something completely different, not related to Esperanto Cardona. And you've just kind of heard me thinking aloud through that problem, because actually, as I was recording the episode today, I just happened to notice it. So I do a little bit of prep work for each episode to kind of think about, all right, what am I going to try to bring out in this document? But this one, as I was just looking at it during the recording, is when I saw that. And so, okay, that's been a nice sort of live experience there of sort of seeing me go through the thought process of how to interpret that at the end, and just wondering about connections to other documents and the people that I know are around. Okay, thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt cara compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. Remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website jonathanseyfried.net to see an image of today's document and additional show notes. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.